Welcome to Church of the Crossroads. We're glad you're here. And if you're new, like if this is your first time and you're just kind of investigating us, let me say what I say very, very often around here, and it's you're worth it. We're glad you're here. You're worth it to Jesus. That's why he died for you, because you're worth it. And because you're worth it to Jesus, you're worth it to us. I hope you know that. I hope you find your worth in him. I want to take this month, January of 2019, and I really want to rally us. So if you're visiting us or investigating us, I'm going to share some things that you haven't heard yet because you've just started, because you're just here investigating. So maybe I'm not talking to you, but listen in. But for those of you who've heard this, I want to rally us for the next 4 weeks. And I also want to revisit maybe the past 15 months. We're 15, 16 months old as a church. We've been in existence that long. And you've heard me say, and share our mission. Like our mission as a church is this. We intentionally cross paths with unconnected people in order to connect them with Jesus. We don't hope it happens. We try to go make it happen. We're looking for opportunities to share the love of Christ with others on a daily basis. We're intentional about that. And then, and I didn't preach on these all year long, just kind of bits and pieces throughout the year, but I also talked about our values early in this last year. Our values are what are important to us, how we think and what we believe, and how we live out this mission. Our values are this. One, we believe there's hope for everyone. Everyone. Jesus died for everyone, for all those who would come to him. We want to contribute more than we consume. We believe it's better to give than to receive. And so we want to be contributors more than we are consumers. We want to be givers. Thirdly, we multiply our efforts often. We want to make disciples. We want to replicate. We want to multiply. We want to replace ourselves to a degree by training up others. And then fourthly, we want to keep it real and relaxed. We want this to be a safe place where you can be yourself, where you can, like we say this often, it's okay here to not be okay. It's okay to share your struggle. We're all in this struggle together. And so we want vulnerability, transparency, genuineness. That's part of who we are. So as a church, this is what we're after. This is what we're about. And this is why we exist. Like we want Mount Washington and beyond. We want our city and beyond to know they are worth it, to know the love of Christ through us, through our love, and we want them to be saved. We want them to experience the eternal life, hope, and security of Jesus Christ. So with all of that we've talked about to this point over the last 15 months, this month I want to take the new year and paint a picture for you of what our church should look like if we're living this out. Like if we were all on board and we were living out this mission and living out these values, this would be our vision, right? This would be our preferred future. This is who we would become. This is what we hope to look like. This is how we hope to be known by our neighbors and city. And I wrote this 2 years ago, before we were even a church. This was kind of my idea of what a healthy church operating and living outside of its walls and loving on its community and its neighbors would look like. So COTC, this is our vision, is a church that offers irrational compassion. It's a church that unconnected people enjoy attending, and it's a church that expects God to do big things. So this is what we hope to one day become known for. This is what we hope is our norm one day in the future. But I'll be honest, it's already happening. This is happening way more quickly than I imagined it would happen. But there's still work to do. So I want to visit this. And this is what I want to do over the next 4 weeks. Anybody know who Bob Ross is? The painter, the 70s, 80s Bob Ross. So I think we have a picture of him. This is Bob Ross, right? He paints happy trees. And I don't know if I think like last year at New Year's, I found that his whole series was on Netflix, and my son sat there. My son and I, he was 17 at the time, watched it for like an hour. Watched Bob Ross paint happy trees. It was unbelievable. Anyway, but I want you to picture me as Bob Ross. I'm going to play the role of Bob Ross this month and slowly paint a word picture of Church of the Crossroads. And hopefully by the end of the month you'll get it. And not just get it, but it'll be etched in our minds, and it'll be something that you can aim for. It can be something that you want to be a part of and contribute to. So this sermon series is entitled, We Are. And today I want us to begin to see a picture of a church that is irrationally compassionate. I want to talk about compassion this morning. because that's, as a church, who we ought to be and what we ought to be becoming. Between the years 1979 and 2009, there was University of Michigan did this study for 30 years where they would interview 400 or 500 college students as they came into college. And so they did that for 30 years. And between the years 1979 and 2009, 14,000 college students were surveyed. And what they found in the survey was there was a dramatic decline in empathy. Like, in fact, this study showed that we care 40% less about other people than we did in the 80s. Like 40% less. We care 40% less. That's tragic. And in the study, they asked questions like they would have the students rank between 1 and 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the most true about you, or the highest truth about you. They asked questions like this, or gave the survey with things like this. It says, I sometimes try to understand my friends better by looking at things from their perspective. I often have tender, concerned feelings about people who are less fortunate than me. I am soft-hearted. So this was part of the survey, and there was a significant drop, a drastic drop in these areas and in all of the areas of study. So the reality is, according to this study, we are not bothered as much as we used to be when it comes to others' misfortunes. Like, we're not bothered by 40% less, or 40% less. We care 40% less. Why is that? Why do we care less? Well, there are a variety of reasons that they have theories on, and one of those has to do with social media. They think that social media is one of the top causes in us that causes us to care less, for a few reasons too. And this is just kind of my opinion. I think for a few reasons social media causes us to care less. The first one is this: social media causes us to be more obsessed with ourselves. Do you agree with that? It is for me. It causes us to be more obsessed with ourselves. And that makes sense too. Like, think about the selfie. Am I right? If you don't know what a selfie is, come on. Like learn what a selfie is. And a selfie is more than just taking a picture of yourself and smiling. Like, there are all kinds of selfies. There's selfies while you drive, which is unsafe. There's the duck face selfie, like, which is supposed to be seductive, which it's not, right? There's the selfie with you and your friends, hashtag besties, right? There's the selfie of you and your mate, your spouse, whatever, at the concert, right? Hashtag where are you? Hashtag my seats are better than you. Like, we take these pictures. There's the selfie of you and your food, which for me, unfollow if you take a picture of you and your food. But you get the idea. Like we are massively obsessed with ourselves. And studies show that when it comes to social media, when it comes to you and me being on social media, when we are on social media, 80% of the time that we are on social media, that time is all about you. Like, when I'm on it, that time is all about me, because I want to know, did you like my picture? I want to know, are you following me? I want to know, did you comment? Did you react with an emoji? Like, social media has created a platform where you can be all about you. And so we're more obsessed with ourselves, partly and greatly due to social media. And because we're obsessed with ourselves, we care less about others. I think a second reason social media can cause us to care less is that it gives us overwhelming exposure to suffering, which then desensitizes us. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this. Like, the more pain we see, the more difficult it is to care. And in social media, we just kind of drift into it, right? Like, the experts even say, the way most of our social media is set up, or timelines are set up, it confuses the brain. It messes with the brain. Because, like, on your timeline, you can look at you scroll through your timeline, there's a picture of guacamole, and then you scroll, and the next picture is an NFL player beating his girlfriend. You keep scrolling, and the next picture is it's a funny cat video. And then the next picture is of a terrorist attack. And what that does to the brain is it desensitizes us because because they're all in the same timeline. They all look just as important as the other on that timeline. And our brain begins to not be able to differentiate which one is more important, guacamole or a terrorist attack. And so the more we're exposed to it, the less sensitive we become. We begin to care less. A third reason social media causes us to care less is because of lack of personal interaction. Like if you post on Facebook that you lost your job, I see that post and I'm going to say, oh man, I'm so sorry, I'm praying for you, and just hit send, and then I might pray for you, or I might forget, right? Let's just call it what it is. But if I don't hear about it on Facebook, but I'm sitting with you at your house, sitting across the table from you, and you say, I've lost my job, and I see the concern on your face, and I hear the despair in your voice as you tell me that you just had to tell your daughters that they can't be involved in dance anymore because of that. And I hear the concern in your voice as you say you've got to go talk to your landlord to find out if he'll show some grace on next month's rent. All right, face to face, that interaction. When I sit with you and I see all of that or I hear all of that, suddenly I'm moved deeply in my heart. Like I care deeply for you in a way that I would not from a distance or just watching it on social media. Like as a church, I don't want us to watch things from a distance, and I don't want us to get desensitized. Social media causes us to disconnect and remain at a distance and not care in a way that people need us to care. So as Christ followers, God calls us to something much more, so much more. And so as a church, I don't want us to keep our distance. I don't want us to unknowingly disconnect. Instead, I want us to be a church that if we're going to be a church in the way that Jesus wanted the church to be, if we or you as an individual are going to be like Jesus, then we need to be the kind of people who lean in, who show up, who make a difference, who really truly care and offer irrational compassion. There's a story in Scripture where Jesus is challenged by a lawyer, a teacher of the law. And the lawyer's trying to corner Jesus in one way, but then he's also trying to justify himself. Like Jesus, tell me the answer to this, because when you say the answer, what you're going to see is just how loving and compassionate I am. So here's how the story goes in Luke chapter 10. It says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. He says, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says, well, what's written in the law? You're the law expert. You tell me. How do you read it? And so the expert in the law says, well, I read, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's the right answer. Do this and you will live. But the lawyer says he still wanted affirmation, right, from Jesus. He wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, well, then who's my neighbor? And then Jesus tells a story. Jesus says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest a religious man happened to be going down the same road. When he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, which would be like 2 days' worth of wages, and gave them to the innkeeper and said, look after him, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. And then Jesus tells that story, and he asks the expert in the law, he says, so which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The question wasn't, who's your neighbor? The question is, are you a neighbor? And the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, then go and do likewise. If we're going to be a church that offers irrational compassion or extraordinary care. What we learn from this story is that compassion requires you to be aware. You know what I mean? Like in this story that Jesus told, a man is on his way somewhere. He's traveling somewhere. He's got a destination to go. He's got he's got to go make a quote on a job. And we don't know if he's in a hurry. We know he's got a destination, and it's not right where this man is injured. But as he's traveling, he keeps his head up, like he's looking. He's aware. And I don't know about you, but there are times where I live my life not very aware of what's going on around me. You know what I mean? Like there are weeks where, there are days where at the end of the day, I'm done. Like I've worked a long day, there were meetings and I studied, and there were counseling appointments and phone calls and texts all day and decisions to make. And so there are days when I leave the office, I'm just done. Like I've said all of my words for the day, right? But on my way home, I've got to swing by whatever, Kroger or Walmart, or I've got to run an errand. And I know that when I go into Kroger or Walmart, I know when I do, I'm going to run into someone I know. From across Walmart or Kroger, I'm going to hear somebody yell, "John Parkey!" And what's going to happen then is I know I'm going to have to engage in conversation, and when honestly I don't have any more words for the day, and I'm going to get home later than I want to. And so I have those days where when I run that errand, I just want to keep my head down, rush in, rush out. Like my mantra is, don't say hi, don't say bye, don't look anybody in the eye. Like that's my mantra when I'm tired, I don't have anything else left to give, right? Now, that's not wrong, and that's not a sin unless I live most of my life like that. Like I have those days where we don't have it to give. But how many of us live our lives in such a rush that we don't see people? We just walk by people and we don't notice them at all. People are an inconvenience. We rush through life so fast that we don't slow down for people. And maybe it's not that you're rushed. Maybe it's that you're distracted. Like maybe for you, it's when you go, even at the grocery store, even at Kroger or Walmart or Value Mart or wherever it is, you're there, you're not rushed, but you live with your eyes locked on your screen. You're never looking at anybody. You never have your head and your eyes up. You don't know what's going on around you because you're distracted, and therefore you rarely interact. Compassion lives with its head up, with its eyes up. Like people of compassion look for ways, even little ways, to encourage, to support, to show care. And in this story, the man walking down the road had his head up, had his eyes open, and he was aware of life that was going on around him. And because he had his head up, he sees this man in need. He sees a man down. Compassion requires us to be aware. Compassion also requires courage. It requires you to be courageous. Like here's a man on the side of the road. He's been beaten, he's been stripped, and he's been left for dead. And the Good Samaritan sees him in need, and he immediately, in this story, it looks like he stops everything and goes immediately to help out this beaten, wounded, almost dead guy. This guy's been mugged and left for dead. He immediately goes to help him. Now, for me, if I were to put myself in that story and I'm walking along the road or driving down the road and I see this scene, I think for me, my fight or flight instinct would kick in. You know what I mean? Like I would step back and go, I want to help. Is he really hurt, or is this a setup? Like, am I going to get? Are the bad guys still around? Like, is this somebody getting ready to take advantage of me? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I would assess the situation. I would be. Is this a trap? Will I get jumped too? And that's fear. That's fear. Like fear, what fear does to us is it causes us to either get ready to fight, or it causes us to get ready to run. Or the third thing is it causes us to freeze, like be frozen and not capable or able of doing anything. Fear and suspicion keep us from helping. Like our fear can talk us out of being compassionate. Like fear says, don't get involved. You'll just get dragged into a mess. Fear says, keep going, don't stop. Selfishness says, and selfishness and fear are interactive. They intermingle. Like I have my selfish motives, I have my agenda, and when something comes along that might interrupt it, my fear kicks in. Like, oh, I don't want to miss it. So selfishness says, I don't know if I want to stop because I've got other things I want to do. It'll make me late. It might cost me something. Like fear and selfishness tend to think worst case scenario, and then they talk us out of being compassionate. And the truth is, compassion requires courage because helping others does cost. It will cost you something, right? The Samaritan has to walk because he puts the injured man on his donkey. The Samaritan spends a night nursing this guy's wounds. The Samaritan gives the innkeeper 2 days' wage, 2 days of wages, so that the innkeeper can continue to care for him and says, I'll be back, and if I got to pay you more, I will. It costs you something. A few years back, I met a guy. I was getting my tires changed at the tire changing place. And kind of at the end of once my tires were changed, the manager was kind of ringing me up, and I just asked him how his day was going or how he's doing. And he said something that made me lean into him a little bit more. He said, I said, how you doing? He said, well, I'm doing better now than I was last year at this time. And he kept ringing me up, and I was like, he's kind of throwing out a bone right there, right? And so I just said, well, what happened last year at this time? He said, well, last year at this time, I had been diagnosed with leukemia. I was going through whatever treatment for that. Because of that, my finances I lost my house, I lost my vehicles, and my wife left me, all in the middle of all that. I was like, yeah, you are doing better than last year. You know, he had a job, and he was healthy. And so over the course of our conversation, long story short, he was at that time actually living with a friend. He was trying to get back on his feet. He was walking to work, which was just 4 or 5 blocks, not even a half mile. When I left there, I thought, I just want to bless this guy. And so I went and got like a Kroger grocery card, and I brought it back to him and said, man, just because you're worth it, just because I love you, just because. And that kind of struck up a friendship. And over the course of the next 3 months, every Sunday, I would drive to pick him up and take him to church with me. And there was a period of time where I helped him get set up in a transitional housing situation in Shepherdsville, which was a lot further away for me, but I still drove to Shepherdsville every Sunday and brought him back to church. And at one point in time, he had to have another surgery, and I went and spent an entire afternoon sitting with him and just joking around and talking with him in the hospital. And that sounds pretty cool, right? That sounds like it might have been rewarding to a degree. But listen, there were a lot of issues, though. Like he and I had to work through some things. Like there were times where he would call me for money, but before I offered, or if I even offered, I would ask, well, what happened to your paycheck? And so we had to sit down and talk about budgeting because his paycheck went to cigarettes and fast food, right? And so I had to sit down and say, you don't spend more than what you bring in, and when you spend it, think through spending it wisely. And I had to walk him through budget and not spending more than he made. And he loved going to church with me. Here's another issue. He loved going to church with me, but he also loved women, right? And so at church, I had to keep watch on him, right? And I even had to warn him and say, look, for 2 hours, don't do it. Like before we get out of the truck, not here. For 2 hours, don't do it. You make people uncomfortable, and we want this to be a safe place. And so I would have to kind of keep my eye on him, right? And it was just, but it was okay. We had a friendship where I could challenge him like that. And I wish I could say that he got his life on track after those 3 months. That never really happened, and he kind of faded out of my life. And I found out a year ago that I think he passed away, got hooked on something and OD'd. And I tell you all that to say that for me, I felt like a failure. Well, like that sort of, to me, feels like a loss. And as there's a part of me that feels like I wasted time with him, and I've been mad at him, and I've been sad for him. But despite all that, looking back, know this, I wouldn't change a thing I did. Because compassion requires courage and taking risks and showing others they're worth it. Like sometimes when I see someone in need, as I assess the situation, I'll hear their history or their story, and I think they're not gonna change. You know, they're not worth my time. I'll click like on your profile, but I'm not showing up. I'm not coming over, right? But I have to fight that. Because they are worth it. They're worth it to Jesus. Jesus died for them too. And I have to love them like he did. So I fight cynicism and I step into the messiness of life with them. That's what courage does. That's what this Good Samaritan did. That's what Jesus did. Compassion also demands action. In the Bible, it requires courage and it also demands action. In the Bible, the Greek word for compassion, I can't pronounce it, actually means, listen to this, to have the bowels yearn. I have no idea what that means, but I can tell you this, Parkerson and I had a good laugh about that in the office earlier this week when I shared with, and I can't tell you what we joked about, but I'm assuming in translation it means there's an aching on the inside, a good aching. It actually means to feel deep empathy. Like today, compassion is the definition. To feel deep empathy and to be moved to action. Like true compassion demands action. Like the Good Samaritan. Like he saw a man in need and he just went for it. And if you remember the story, before the Good Samaritan shows up, there are two other religious leaders in the community who see this guy laying in a coma, bleeding on the side of the road, but they didn't stop. Like I don't know, they kept their distance, you know? As they walked by, did they even say, praying for you, man, you know? Hope somebody comes along who can help you as they walk by, or, you know, praying for healing, or, you know, they kept their distance. They stayed unconnected. They didn't step into the mess. They just walked by. Now, did they care? They might have thought, poor guy, that's terrible. Ooh, that's bad. They might have had caring thoughts, but did they care? Because compassion demands action. To say you care but not act is to not care at all. Like caring is not clicking like or offering up a sad emoji. Caring is acting. Caring is actually being involved to make a difference. It's being so moved that you get outside of yourself so that you can stop looking at yourself in order to see others and get involved in their life. Like this is what Jesus did while he was on this earth. Like he healed, he counseled, he helped, he fed, he sat down and just listened. He was just there. He showed up. Jesus showed up. And so this is why we have to get to know Jesus and follow Jesus. Because if we don't, we will always be about ourselves. Like the more I obsess over myself, the less I care about others. But the more I obsess about Jesus, I want to know him, I want to serve him, I want to get close to him. The more I obsess about Jesus, the less I care about me. And strangely then, the more I begin to care about others. Like the more I love my neighbor, I see my neighbor, I show up and I serve my neighbor. Compassion costs something. And one of our small groups, Jake's small group, actually, he did a couple of the baptisms, first couple. Kevin's in that group that's standing up here, right? That small group is ministering to the homeless to some degree. And one of the things they do is they make like gift bags that has hygiene products and snacks and stuff like that in it for the homeless. But they're doing more than just that. They're not just driving by. Like they're trying to, in some ways, befriend them. Like this group is putting down their screens and their agendas and trying to just spend some time with them. And a few weeks ago, they brought a couple, a man and a woman who were homeless. They brought them to church, and as a church, we were able to love on them. Now, it took some time, and it took some effort, and it took some relationship building on the small group's part, on Jake's part, but that's what compassion does. Like, compassion is messy, man. Clicking like is clean, and it's easy, but compassion interrupts our lives in a way that changes our lives, and hopefully the lives of those we care for. And my hope is, as a church, we live our lives like this. We live our lives like this. I hope that we don't, I hope that as we leave here, we leave here with our head up. I hope this week we live with our eyes up and not locked on our screen, but locked on the life going on around us and the lives who are walking past us and that we cross paths with this week. I hope we are the kind of people who see people and show up. Like, I hope that's who we are. And if not, I hope that's who we're becoming. I hope that's who we are becoming for the sake of Christ. Because listen, compassion changes your life. You grow more and more into the likeness of Christ as you grow in compassion, but it changes the lives of others as well. Because when we offer compassion, what we are saying to people is, you're worth it. Where other people around you might be saying, you're not worth it, you're not worth my time, you're not worth my energy, you're not worth my resources, we say, oh yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. I may not give you everything that you want because there are some things you need to overcome, but I'm here to walk on this journey with you so that you can overcome whatever it is you're going through, but even greater than that, so that you can overcome and know the freedom and the hope and the joy and the peace and the life that Jesus is promising you and has for you. We become more like Jesus when we're compassionate people.